Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the session, Collaborative Strategic Thinking in the Government Sector. It is said change begins with a vision, but I guess it's only an well executed and at times innovative ways that help bring about change. In this session, we will discuss how strategic collaboration outside the norms can at times materializing in creating greater societal impact, and specifically in the government sector. We have a very interesting line of speakers who will be sharing their experiences. It gives me great pleasure to introduce to our panel moderator for the session, Emmanuel David, whom we very affectionately call Emmy, a multifaceted professional who wears multiple hats, serving and contributing across industries and different areas of society. Currently, the managing director of Grid International India. Emmy is also an ICF certified coach, certified leadership circle profile practitioner, and holds certifications for Hogan assessment and Belbin team roles. I must say that Emmy was one of the key person who influenced the Central Labour Commissionerate, XLRI, and IIM Ahmedabad to kind of join hands and create that partnership that saw the first executive development program for labor commissioners take place. Emmy has also served as a director of TMTC and worked closely with civil servants, politicians, defense personals, including coaching and mentoring and training bureaucrats, which provides him a ringside view of working with the government sector. So over to you, Emmy.
Good afternoon, friends. Thank you, Sudeep, for those wonderful words of welcome and introducing a very important topic for us. I'm particularly excited that we have an illustrious panel this afternoon to look at collaborative strategic thinking in the government sector. And it is my belief then when we look at impacting leadership at these levels, it becomes a force multiplier. Our first panelist is Dr. Jayant Dasgupta. Dr. Jayant Dasgupta is IS. He's done his stint as an IAS officer and retired a few years ago. Some of his notable positions and responsibilities have been significant for our country and the world. He was the ambassador of India to the WTO for 4 years between 2010 and 14, which saw a lot of work happening for the country. He's also served as Secretary, Economic Advisory Council to the Prime Minister, and Joint Secretary Trade Policy in the Department of Commerce. Originally from the Bihar cadre, he has served in several positions there, and I can actually go on and tell you, but it will be a long time. He's currently a consultant, arbitrator, and practicing lawyer, specializing in domestic and international trade, environmental, food, and biodiversity law. And so, if you have any uh, thing to talk about around these areas, you know that Dr. Dasgupta is the man. He's also a consultant for various UN bodies, and he serves as independent director on other uh, boards like the MMTC, and is in the high-level advisory committee of the International Trade of Department of Commerce, and with CII and various think tanks. Dr. Dasgupta has a master's in physics, and he's also done his MBA, and he's legally trained and a doctorate in economics. So we've got some tons of insight. Welcome, Dr. Dasgupta, to this panel. Thank you so much, sir, for
Thank
coming
you.
here.
Thank you. It's a pleasure. It's a
Welcome, sir.
pleasure. And thank you for the very kind words.
Most welcome. And next panelist for us is Dr. Pushp Kumar Joshi. Pushp Joshi. Yes, there he is. Pushp, uneasy lies the head that wears the crown, as they say. Pushp is the chairman and managing director of Hindustan Petroleum Corporation Limited. And just to give you understanding. The market cap is quite a lot. I can't count the number of zeros, but I think the turnover is over 80,000 crores. And Pushp has been part of the board of directors of HPL since 2012 as director HR. And during his tenure in the board, HPCL became a Maharatna company. Uh, they've done some fantastic projects, which, ladies and gentlemen, are impacting your everyday life. And particularly, those of you in Bombay will know that the Mumbai refinery expansion project is one such thing, the Bathinda refinery, and several such mega projects Pushp has been working around. So, under his leadership, he has been able to actually implement several leadership development initiatives. I spoke on projects, but he's given his focus and attention to people as well. And we have things like the Akshay and the Akshay Path, the Periscope, the HP Possible. I think there are several things HPCL is doing and has done, both on the project side and the people side. And when I was having my preliminary conversations, it was very exciting to know the work which is innovative, which has been doing as such. Pushp is a alumnus of XLRI, did his post-graduation from XLRI, and also is a doctorate in human resource management. And he's also qualified himself in law from the Andhra University. We have a third panelist, Dr. Winston Jacob. So when he comes in, I will introduce him to you. But friends, when we look at the government sector and looking at collaborative strategic thinking, it is not. It is an interesting aspect. We look at coaching from the direction. It has its own ups and challenges and downsides as well. So to help us get a picture of what is it to be in the government sector, I'd like to ask Dr. Dasgupta to kind of paint a picture of what the government sector is. And after that, I'll request Pushp to also tell what is it working for a public sector company as well. And what are the challenges, what are the opportunities, especially. Dr. Dasgupta, over to you.
Thank you, Mr. David. It's indeed a pleasure to be here on this panel. I will touch upon a few aspects of working in the government sector, especially in the state governments, with just a brief mention of working in the central government as well. In the state government, the major problems that a government servant encounters right from day one of his stint is, and if you speak of states which are industrially not very well developed, where the infrastructure again is not up to the mark, and the social sector indices like health and education are also lagging behind the rest of the states in the country. And I will speak about my experiences in the context of Bihar, where I have served for a long time. Now, if you look at the problems which are faced by the civil servants, which are basically the problems of the people, the first one which comes to mind is the problem of livelihoods, of ensuring that every able-bodied man or woman who is wanting to get work, gainful work, gets employment. It may be in the government sector, it may be in the private sector, it may be as a self-employed person. So that is problem number one. The second problem is about connectivity. Today, with so much of advancement having taken place in the digital sphere, every person can benefit by being digitally connected. And we all know that there are these programs which are the Pradhan Mantri Jan Dhan Yojana, the JAM Trinity, which is dependent on connectivity. So digital connectivity and infrastructure is going to be one of the major issues and challenges which will be facing an administrator as well as the people. And I am not speaking only in terms of providing the infrastructure on behalf of the government, but about enabling as an individual citizen, and especially from the poorer classes, to benefit fully from digital, the digital space. The third issue, and it is not in order of importance, is threefold. That is, it has three facets. One of them is about basic health care, about being taken care of by the state. If one falls ill or one needs hospitalization, surgery, for instance. So that is one aspect. The second aspect is about having a roof over one's head, about a place where one can stay and pursue his or her profession. The third one is, and this deals with both the adult population as well as the children, that is about skilling, about education, which can lead to improvement of skills and can improve one's livelihood prospects. Now, for that, there are people who may have gone through the first few years of schooling, but may not have the requisite skills. And a large number of surveys have shown that numeracy and basic literacy skills are wanting even at the stage of class 5 in the government system. So these are the three issues. And then comes the issue of sanitation of drinking water, which is connected with health. So these are some of the challenges which you will face. And finally, the ownership of assets, which determines how much a family on an average can progress, can improve its standards of living. Now, if you, land used to be, and it still is, a very valuable asset. But if you look at the present holding pattern of land, our average holdings are just around 1 hectare per family of 5 for the landholders. If you look at the large numbers of people who are dependent on agriculture and allied industries or professions, you will find their numbers runs into crores, who are living in the rural areas, who are dependent on agriculture, do not own any land or any other valuable asset which can be utilized for improving their standards of living. So these are some of the challenges. Now I will speak again about the challenges faced by administrators. One of them is that the tenures of administrators in the states is not very long. So you have to come to grips with the situation, realize and understand what are the problems in a particular area. Then you have to chalk out a plan, and then you have to look for proper implementation agencies, through agencies. Now herein comes the issue of collaboration, association, participation, not only by your immediate staff and officers, complement of officers, but by the people at large. Unless there is people's participation in any scheme of the government which are meant to benefit them, basically the beneficiary, likely beneficiary group, it is not going to succeed. So this is one of the most important things which needs to be borne in mind. And how does one communicate? How does one come across as credible, as somebody who's uh, trying and who will succeed with the support of the people? I think that is a very, very crucial factor. And last but not the least is the interaction with vested interests, including entrenched interests in a particular area or in a sector, because these, if there are schemes which are implemented, new policy decisions are taken, then obviously some people will get affected adversely. And these people will fight back. And we have to devise all the time strategies to keep such interests at bay, to keep them, uh, in a position where they can't affect the implementation of projects or schemes. In the central government, very briefly, I've spoken at length on the state's problems. In the central government, the main issue is about coordination because uh, of our federal structure. In most areas, the central government does not actually implement schemes or projects. They are done by the state governments, whether it is agriculture, whether it is irrigation, uh, power, and so on and so forth. So the basic task of a civil servant is again coordination, again about building up support from the states. The best example of this is the abolition of VAT and the introduction of GST. This showed, of course, it took time. Nothing comes very easily in a very large country like India with its complexities. But it is a shining example of success in coordination, in pursuing a common goal. Of course, there are glitches. The GST system is far from perfect even now, but those glitches can always be ironed out with sincere effort, with commitment, and with, again, cooperation from all concerned. So I'll stop here. These are some of the thoughts which came to mind.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Dr. Dasgupta. In fact, in such a short time, you've been able to give a canvas and what the terrain is. And it's not a smooth terrain. That's what we understand. But friends, I'm very happy. So we'll come back to you. There are lots of points you raised. I'm sure Pushp is also going to cover and support you on that. I've got Dr. Winston Jacob in, and so I'd request that he comes on stage. Yeah. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce Dr. Winston Jacob. He's a lifelong learner, as he says. He had his early stint in Unilever, and then he chose a path which is not trod and went on to go to Papua New Guinea for a 2-year assignment, as he said. And he went on to actually be a management consultant to the government, and he's been able to develop the cadre of civil servants at Papua New Guinea. So we're going to have an exciting discussion from him on what he did over there. And so welcome, Dr. Jacob. I'm sorry, there were some tech glitches which didn't let you come in. So I will just like to welcome you. I'm glad that you're here. We're going to listen to you in a minute. But any quick words from you of welcome from your side?
Thank you very much, Jamie. I'm really grateful and humbled to be with you all today and share my experiences with all the coaches and the community that's gathered together.
Right. So we'll come to you in a moment. I'll request Dr. Pushp Joshi to speak to us on what is the landscape in a government sector organization. And he's been a lifer there, and he's seen it through his own lifetime. And now, right from joining as a young management trainee to being the CMD of the company, it must be very exciting. I'm really proud that a person who's been in human resources, is occupying the corner office. But Push, over to you. Like to understand your context, and so that our audience understands what this public sector is all about.
Thank you very much, Amy. Thank you very much. And I also thank you for that embarrassingly long introduction which you gave. It's absolute privilege that I am sharing this screen with the likes of Dr. Dasgupta and Dr. Jacob. So thank you very much. I mean, it's a privilege for me that I'm part of this panel. And when Dr. Dasgupta was talking, he very elegantly actually mentioned the whole arena. And I mean, that he has made actually sort of my job easier, so that I can, take a subset out of it and talk about, PSU and the commercial organizations. Now, first thing first, I mean, in my mind, there are various kinds of categorization which we can do of the commercial entities. One such categorization could be public sector, private sector, and like that. But to my mind, what is more important is the categorization where we see that the companies which are in effective sector and companies which are not that effective. Now, in both these categorizations, you would find PSU players, you would find private players, and in the other also, you can find the players of both use in effective and non-effective. Now, being in a commercial setup and in a PSU, oftentimes it is thought about that, it would have challenges, it would have opportunities and things like that. But my perspective after working for almost 3.5 decades is that it's not challenges per se, it is actually a different track which is there to achieve that objective. Now, the track is obviously different from a company, let us say, which operates in a private sector. But ultimate objective of both the institutions or setup is to achieve that kind of growth, that kind of progress for the company, and have the satisfaction of the various stakeholders who are involved. So from that perspective, now the difference would be, to my mind, in a public sector is that our endeavors are not confined to the four walls of the corporation. They go beyond the boundaries of the corporation in terms of the social domain in which we operate. And at the root of all this is basically how do we enable human performance to achieve the objectives which we have set off for ourselves. Now, in achieving that kind of enabling human performance and ensuring that human endeavor is there to meet these objectives, we rely on various kind of things. We rely on various modes, and what has held us in good stead is a very broader view of enabling human performance, and their collaboration is the most integral part of that strategy which we have to take to enable human performance. As I keep on saying that normally there is a wise way of doing things and there is a otherwise way of doing things. Now, that otherwise way of doing things does not mean that it's an unwise way of doing things. Only thing is that it has a longer kind of approach. It is called a longer arena, and in the arena which we operate as corporation, as HPCL, only I think possibly when you talked about our turnover and you had mentioned so many zeros, possibly you got mixed up in some zeros. Actually, last year our turnover was 3,76,000 crores. So you had mentioned a figure of 80. So I think some zeros here and there. Nevertheless, the thing is that in operating in these kind of environment, what is critical is that on one hand, we have competition. Normally, the thing is thought about that PSUs are monopolies and they operate in a very secured sector. No, but we are exposed to competition both national and international in our product lines. So that is always there. apart from that, we are also, we don't get any budgetary support per se, so that we have to generate our own resources. We have to do our own growth, our own infrastructure planning. So against all that background, it is incumbent on a company like ours to actually enable human performance, to ensure that human endeavor is maximized. Now there we may have a different set of rules to play the game. We don't have that much of control, that much of flexibility on fixing the compensation packages with that kind of greater flexibility, because we have to follow certain principles and certain principles of equity. So what is available with us to motivate our people is to develop them as composite human beings, as a complete human being, where the job or the work which he is doing is one subset of his personality. For example, when I go to market to hire, let's say, a mechanical engineer, now in return, I'm not getting only the mechanical engineering skills. I'm getting a complete package. A subset of that package is his mechanical engineering skills. So what happens is I have to address to a person as a complete whole, and their collaboration, counseling, these kind of things play a very central role. And oftentimes it is thought that we have to do coaching and things like that when a person reaches a middle level or a senior middle level. Our experience is that right from day one, when a person joins your organization, we have to bring this kind of focus in his personality right from day zero, that if he has to grow, collaboration is integral. Looking at the whole complete picture is very integral. And therefore, we just set up a sort of credo for our organization, which we call HP First. And in that HP First nomenclature, first is free, frank, and things like that. But what is more integral to this is FIR. That R portion is the thing which we lay a lot of stress on, and the R is respect for individuals, irrespective of hierarchy. It has given us good dividend when we actually bring in this culture that everybody has to be respected as a human being. Getting back more to the specific topic, in terms of our programs, in terms of collaborative strategy, as I said, that it is not restricted to the four corners. Now, when we do our CSR work, when we do our social kind of initiatives, when we take, we actually give opportunity to our officers, to our employees, to impact a larger section of the society, because there is a symbiotic relationship between us and the society. It is, as we often say, it's a 100% partnership between the organization and the society. It is not that if society does something, we do something. It's not contingent on each other's input. It is actually a joint responsibility, and that, to my mind, is collaboration at its peak, at the largest view which we can look at. Now, that said, internally, the programs which we design is, we are faced with situations where we have generation diversity, gender diversity, and also demographic diversity, which Dr. Dasgupta had very elegantly mentioned. So by generation diversity, what I mean is that we have in our on our roles people who are very young, who are sub 30, people who are middle-aged, and people who are seniors, who are plus 55 and all that. So different generations would require a different kind of approach and different kind of understanding of each other. So we tackle this generation diversity through our coaching programs, through our collaborative coaching programs, also in terms of gender diversity, because it is our firm belief that unless we do a very good job of it, we will not be able to leverage the full potential of human resources. Although we have improved our gender ratio in past few years, and that is a very encouraging thing. But I would say still, when it comes to conversion to middle level and senior senior management, we are not that good. There's a lot of work needs to be done, because while we have a lot of employees coming in, but when they go to middle age and when they go to senior management level, it drastically falls down. The percentage drastically falls down. So that is where again coaching is extremely important. And demographic diversity, which I mentioned, our company, we have 230 locations across the country in different states, and every state has got a different culture, has got a different background. Now, while people may come and join an organization where they have a common purpose, but as human beings, as individuals, they come from different cultures. They come from different kind of geographies, demographies, and things like that. So how do we leverage that to our advantage? Again, that is where this kind of counseling and coaching comes in. That is as far as the initial input or introduction, which I thought I would mention. But I would prefer a more interactive kind of a discussion, where I would be able to sort of clarify on certain points and receive feedback. So thank you very much for this part of it. Thank you.
Push, my apologies on getting my zeros wrong.
Not at all. Don't worry too much about it.
All the more kudos to you that you're doing an amazing job over there, and with the kind of complexity you have. So friends in the audience, you've heard about what happens in India, right from the government sector and a public sector for-profit company. It is not an easy road, and I hope in the last 30 minutes has given you a picture of the kind of issues people face. Okay, we've just got one quick poll for you before I go to Dr. Winston Jacob. There's a poll. Would you please respond to that poll? Simple question, and then we will have both all of us speak on that. So it takes about 30 seconds or so. It's a yes/no thing. Are you able to see the poll? The question is it possible to coach people in government sector? Yes, no, or I don't know. These are your options.
You want panelists us to respond to that?
No. I'm asking the audience to respond.
Yeah, I thought so, because we are devout on that. So.
Yeah. We're just seeing, it's always good to get a dipstick of what our enlightened audience thinks. Okay, we'll get the poll results in a while. Please do take time to put it. So friends, I want to request Dr. Winston Jacob to tell us about the terrain at Papua New Guinea, and let's understand the complexity he faced. And you have to press the rewind button of life and go almost about 35 years. So Dr. Jacob, over to you. You can unmute yourself and give us a picture of Papua New Guinea.
Thank you, Amy. And thank you for the opportunity to be on this panel with two distinguished gentlemen and yourself. And I thank ICF also for organizing this conclave, which is a very, very timely conclave to showcase to the world the importance of coaching and the impact that it has on people. My journey actually, after I finished my work with Unilever in India, because the emphasis here, working with them, the emphasis was on social life, not on your professional life. And that's when I decided, okay, the yardstick is not correct. And I thought I'm wasting my time here. Maybe I should venture out. That's when I started looking out internationally. And it was divine intervention that miraculously this door was opened to me in a country called Papua New Guinea, a country that is known as the land of the unexpected. Every day something happens and everybody's on their alert. So it so happened that Papua New Guinea did not have any High Commission in New Delhi, and it was the Australian High Commission that was conducting these visa and work permit approvals. Took a long time, even going to the Australian High Commission when they see an Indian coming over and standing there, a lot of questions are asked. Anyway, this procedure took 3 months, which was good. It gave me time to do a bit of research on the country. I went to the British High Commission and read all about the country. All the my relations advised me not to go because they said that they practice cannibalism. And when I went and read up about the country, everything that I saw was positive. And I decided that we have to take this bold step. And went on a 2-year contract. It was an Australian New Guinea Development Company based in Sydney, where I had a 3-day orientation. And every time I asked the managing director why there was this attrition rate, he wouldn't answer the question. So I knew that there was a great problem. Went into this country. My dear friends, it's known as the land of the unexpected, but it's got the best fauna and flora on earth. It's the only country in the world that's got gold under the seabed, which has still not been mined. They've just started mining solid gold under the seabed. And my role there was actually, they had just got independence. So my job there was actually to train national managers. I had to initially work with the Institute of Management, and I had to train these managers. So with my association with the International Management Center of United Kingdom, I introduced an action learning lifelong program for the public sector there. And it so happened that my trainees, the first trainee that I had to interview was from the Prime Minister's department. And I had to explain to them what action learning was. So that took a fair while. And initially, it was time management that had to be tuitioned to them, and they got to know about this. My dear friends, Papua New Guinea is a very jovial country. They are very fond of music. They sing very well. And their parties start on Friday and ends up on Monday. They don't drink in glasses and bottles, but they drink in cartons. So one carton finishes, they go and get another carton. So the moment they came into my training room, my first advice to them was that they have to train themselves to change their diet, the diet of liquid diet to knowledge diet. It was not an easy thing to do with human beings, unlike machines. So it took a while, but I'm glad to tell you that all who came into my training room, they changed their way of life. They changed from the mode of drinking to getting the hunger and thirst for the body of knowledge. The reason being, all their assignments had to come to my desk on the Monday, and on the Wednesday, I had to send it for the assessment to United Kingdom. All quality controls were conducted in the United Kingdom, and it was done at the Oxford University. And this process took a few months, but I'm glad to tell you that they were able to get their certificate in business management, their diploma, their master's degree, and doctorate programs. For the graduation ceremony, I took them all to the Oxford University of United Kingdom. It was the first time that they got on a plane. And during the time of training, which was marathon training that I had to do, they had to get their assignments on my desk on the Monday because I had to courier to United Kingdom on Wednesday. So I had to be very strict on this. And there were times when I had to physically lock them in my office to have these assignments all done on time. And it was one of those things that, you know, human nature being what it is, some of their wives thought these men were having a wonderful time. And some of the wives actually left them. But I'm glad to tell you that when graduation came, especially the Prime Minister's secretary, I told him, you invite your wife for the graduation ceremony. And that's what he did. At the graduation ceremony, when it was over, my dear friends, the wife came and embraced me. And I told her, you should be embracing your wife, not me, because he's the one who graduated. And so the interesting part of this whole training program, being public servants, after this training program on lifelong learning, action learning, they actually revamped their entire village. They went back and started their own businesses in their villages. And it was a complete transformation. The Prime Minister and Governor General couldn't believe that here comes a fellow from India and he's able to overnight do this when they had been hiring highly paid consultants from all over the world. And they were not able to achieve this. So here was the miraculous hand of God being on me to teach these boys, the public servants. And this was actually started with they had to identify a difficult problem that they encounter at their working desk. So their thesis was to come up with solutions, how they are going to sort this out. That was the thesis of each of the public servants. And my dear friends, it was wonderful. They came up with some beautiful assignments completed, which was applauded in the University of Oxford. And they came and implemented it as well. And this trickled down to their homes, villages, and it was a tremendous success story. And for me, being one of the coaches there, it gave me a lot of joy to see that when you plant something, you're able to see the immediate results. And this is what happened over there. So the Prime Minister and Governor General were so thrilled about this. They actually thought that this is something that they have never understood. And, you know, the Prime Minister's office, the printing office for the government came under the Prime Minister's control. And they were running actually at a loss. And when this secretary of the Prime Minister trained him, and from zero budget, he went into millions of dollars profit. A complete turnaround, a real showcase model which is there. It trickled down to all the departments. And this is going down now from government level right up to provincial level. I had to travel right up the mountain ranges to remote areas. Some places I had to walk, but it was a wonderful experience to me as well, because it was a learning experience for me. You know, here we are blessed with everything, and here I go to a country that's having a lot of difficulties, mountainous terrain, and a lot of hardships. I underwent a lot of problems where my life was threatened too, because, you know, the World Bank opened a bank for the country, and they called it the Papua New Guinea Development Bank. And I was engaged by the government to even do training for them. And the senior staff went through this action learning program on lifelong learning. And today they've become a training center for the Pacific region. So there you go. You know, the benefits of coaching are tremendous. When you look at human lives and how they can not only listen to what's being said, but they're able to change their mindset. And here we are having now modern technology coming in, so they had to also engage in that. We know that we are coming into a serious digital age. And it's really a miracle to see how these people who never handled a laptop, they were able to handle the laptops, do their assignments on time, and then they were also able to help their families and all those in their villages as well. So That's my little story, and I'd like to Thank you all for listening.
We'll come
Thank
back to you, Prof.
Thank you.
Dr. Jacob will come back to you. But I think it's, as I can see from the chat comments also, it is quite an inspiring, narrative and an experience. So friends, as you can see, you listened to Dr. Dasgupta, Dr. Joshi and Dr. Jacob. In fact, I'm very privileged that we got 3 doctors here and they're sharing their insights. So you understand that the terrain is not so easy. When we look at our corporates or we train one-on-one, it is one context. I'm not saying it's less easy, but this has its own complexity. And in that complexity, to bring about change, bring about positive change, has a different ask. May I ask Dr. Dasgupta to just help us understand what are some of the things he did, particularly, the impact at the WTO level and how coaching has helped him. What did you do? If you could give us a few narratives, Dr. Dasgupta.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. David. I was listening with rapt attention to what Dr. Pushp Joshi mentioned about the complexities of managing a PSU and Dr. Winston Jacobs' marvelous experiences in transforming the government sector in a way in Papua New Guinea. The experience that I had in the WTO was quite mundane in comparison to the 2 eminent speakers that I just mentioned. One of the issues which I faced, and I would like to focus on that, was about the issue of public stockholding for food security purposes. Now, as you know, India was a food deficit country at the time of independence. But by about 1967-68, when the Green Revolution started showing results, we gained in confidence, we gained in our overall production, and in a few years' time, we had become more or less self-sufficient. At the same time, 1967, there were widespread droughts in many of the northern states. And even before that, during the conflict with Pakistan in 1965, we had food shortages which were localized in places. It was not widespread. So we embarked on a system of the public distribution, which is basically, if you can put it, ration shops, as we call it in North India. Now, in order to provide the food grains, which was basically wheat in the initial stages, and then it was rice was added to it, and then edible oil was added to it, sugar was added to it. Now, in most states, it is only wheat or rice. The other things are not getting distributed through the public distribution system. Now, in order to have very large quantities of wheat and rice to distribute to the people, and I must mention that if we take the Pradhan Mantri Ann Yojana and the National Food Security Act commitments, we distribute food to about 80 crore people out of approximately 140 crore population of India, which is a humongous number. And the requirements of food to be distributed through the system are also very, very large. Now, how do we provide the food, and how do we also at the same time encourage the small farmers and the marginal farmers who are in a majority in India to keep producing food at higher and higher levels? Now, this is the challenge which has been addressed through the minimum support price operations in India for a very long time. Now, the WTO negotiations, which got transformed into the Agreement on Agriculture and which came into force from 1995 onwards, it was negotiated over a period of 1986 to 94. And in that, the main concern was about the European Union providing huge subsidies to its dairy farmers and to certain sectors like the wine grape growers. So the European Union used to subsidize so heavily that it led to lakes of wine and mountains of butter, as one commentator sarcastically put it. Now, the provisions which were put in the Agreement on Agriculture of the WTO were meant to prevent the European Union from carrying on with its egregious subsidies. It was not meant to affect the minimum support price program in India, which was basically meant to provide food to the needy people through the public distribution system. Unfortunately, the provisions in that agreement, one of them says that the 1986 to 88 reference price, which was either the export price or the import price of wheat or rice or any other commodity which is distributed and procured first, that will be considered as the reference price. And whatever you are offering today as the minimum support price will be compared with that to find out if the government is subsidizing the farmers. Now, at that point of time, if I remember correctly, wheat was the external reference price for wheat. We were importing wheat still at that point of time. It was about 3 rupees. Today, the minimum support price is around 20 rupees. So by that calculation, the subsidy is about 17 rupees per kilogram that the government of India is providing. Now, if you work out the permissible subsidies of the government, this is way beyond that. And in terms of the agreement, we found that in 2010 or so, we would fall foul of the WTO agreements and we would be asked to conform to the commitments that India had made, which was basically that India would have to stop its minimum support price operations or bring it down, pare it down very, very substantially so that it would not really be of any use. And it would directly affect the distribution of food grains to tens of crores of the beneficiaries. So this was the challenge that we were faced with about amending a provision of the Agreement on Agriculture. And what could we have given in return? Because in the WTO, everything is on a reciprocal basis. If somebody gives you something or allows you to, some leeway on some provision, then that country or group of countries will expect something in return. So that is the way it operates. So when India and a few countries, first of all, we had to garner support for amending this provision. And we then reached out to a very large number of developing countries. We also had to do a lot of research on our own to find out. And it wasn't very easy because the poorer developing countries don't have their government programs published on the website or it's not available online. So this is the kind of challenge that we faced. But we reached out to a very large number of countries and we said that it was a common problem. India was facing it immediately, but they would also come under scrutiny and they would also have to stop their programs which were on a similar footing. So this was the first stage. The second stage was in sensitizing the exporting countries who were exporting agricultural products and who had India on their crosshairs. Because India, if it was unable to provide this kind of minimum support price to its farmers, its production would have gone down. It would have then had to import again on import food grains for keeping its public distribution system going. So exporting countries didn't want to give any leeway, didn't want to give any concessions. This was the challenge that we faced. So the second aspect was about sensitizing the exporting countries to the problems that India was facing, not only as a country, but in terms of the huge numbers that were involved and the misery that it would have caused them if our programs were not allowed to continue. So the negotiations took place over 2-3 years, and there were many ups and downs. The exporting countries, many of them were developed countries like Australia, like New Zealand, Canada, the US, and there were developing countries like Brazil and Argentina, which also have a very strong export in agricultural products. So it took us a lot of effort to reach out individually to countries to persuade them to and to convince them that their reservations and problems could be tackled if a common solution acceptable to all were worked out. So this is how, and of course, I don't want to get into details, but ultimately there was a standoff. And what India had to do, along with, again, another group of countries, was to have a trade-off with another agreement which the developed countries were very keen on pushing, which was the trade facilitation agreement. And they wanted to push it to bring about reforms in the developing countries so that their exports to the developing countries were facilitated in terms of the transaction costs coming down, in terms of the time taken for clearances, etc., etc. So two things were traded off. One, India and the other countries said that you can't have a walkover in this and put the developing countries on the back foot and ask them to pay a price for your export benefits. The second thing was, you will have to spend money, provide assistance to the developing countries for building up their infrastructure for trade facilitation. So overall, I think this was the trade-off, but it needed a lot of cooperation, support, and commitment from our partners, from the governments in Africa, in the Caribbean islands, in South America, a few of them. And internally, the departments in India, because the matter also went up to the cabinet and was discussed. So in all departments in the government of India which were involved, the Department of Consumer Affairs, Agriculture, the Commerce Ministry, External Affairs, they all had to be on the same page and had to be persuaded that this is something which was required. So this is the major, I think, happening which took place during my tenure. Both the agreements, the trade facilitation agreement was harvested, and a very, very important change took place in that the poorer developing countries, especially the least developed countries, were not forced to take on all the commitments of trade facilitation without their being in a position to accept them. First, they had to be helped, assisted with technical know-how, with infrastructure building, and then only when they were in a position to do so, they would accept the commitments. That was one part. The second part was, there was a peace clause which was put in so that India and other countries on a similar footing could carry on with their minimum support price programs till a permanent solution were found. Thank you for this very long-winded
But
presentation.
tell me one thing. I have a quick follow-up question for you. There would have been moments of dilemma and conflict for you, and you are the person leading this. What did you do at those moments? Did you look to somebody for support, a senior officer, or how did you handle those moments of conflict or dilemmas in your heart?
Well, I would first like to mention that when India first broached this subject with the exporting countries and the developed countries, one of the representatives said that India has just dropped its first atom bomb. That
Okay.
was the kind of reaction. And I must say that when, I had, I was faced with a dilemma, with a problem of which a solution was not emerging, I would consult my senior officers in commerce, in agriculture, in other ministries, and some of my mentors in the IAS or other services to whom I had looked up for their clarity of vision, for their decisiveness, and overall wisdom. So it all counted, it all came back, and I could then put the pieces together and think of working out a solution.
Thank you so much for that candor, because I know that as a serving officers have certain constraints and boundaries on whom to consult, how to consult. But nevertheless, as human beings, as professionals, we do need that. We have that need, and that's where perhaps coaching is an opportunity. That's how I see it. But yes, thank you so much for that sharing, Dr. Dasgupta. Let's just go further. Uh, Push, here's a question for you about what is Scope's role in CPSU's growth? Is it independent body or only a spokes person or for the ministry? This is what L.S. Murthy, who's quite an accomplished coach in the country, he's asking us this question. And as you respond to that, could also tell of the work you've done at HPCL, particularly on coaching, uh, also with the youngsters you spoke yesterday. Uh, just conscious of time, gentlemen, we need to be closing in about 20 odd minutes. So let's just
Yeah, I
go
mean,
ahead and
first, as far as scope is concerned, it's actually an umbrella body of all the PSUs. So it is both at times useful and at times, gets into the too broad kind of a platform. So, but certain specific things, especially in the development arena, in the arena where training programs can be there, where coaching programs would be there, their scope is quite effective. And in the recent times, the role which scope has taken in creating awareness on coaching, on various kind of development inputs, so it is pretty effective there. It does not have a sort of statutory power. It does not have that kind of power to mandate anything. So therefore, that may at times
okay.
impact their effectiveness. So that's it about scope. Now, for HPCL, very briefly, I mean, I would mention, and like Dr. Dasgupta mentioned, a much bigger challenge, but a challenge of sort in HPCL. You see, we are actually what we call a homegrown company. So 100% of our board or the senior management comes from within. You see, people join at the entry level, and actually they superannuate after the service of 3.5 decades and things like that. So that both is an opportunity and a challenge for us. Now the challenge aspect of that is that how do you actually keep people enthused or motivated over such a prolonged period of time, where there are changes in environment, there are changes in technical input, there are changes in demography of people. So how do you keep people motivated? And as I said, that we don't have too much of sort of flexibility in terms of monetary compensation. So that also is a challenge. So, and what happens is that normally by efflux of time, people would, some energy will get leaked, some energy will get drained off, and some kind of, complacency may set in by default, mostly, and by design in certain cases, because, it provides a security envelope. So this challenge was there before us. And what we worked out, that this would be a good starting point to address this issue through counseling, through a broader platform. And there we started by asking a question to people, that why do we work actually? And when we answer that question, when we explore that question in detail, we definitely get certain deeper answers. Because normal superficial answer, or not superficial, the surface answer would be that I work to earn my livelihood. But when we go further on this, every human being would want some kind of purpose, some kind of meaning in the work he's doing. Because ultimately, work becomes our identity in these kind of setups. So we start with that, then help the people through coaching, through these kind of mentoring, and a big portion of that is emotional intelligence, the training on emotional intelligence, bringing that as a platform, bringing a platform where we provide them that they can achieve certain of their values or purposes beyond the organization setup also. And you had asked a very interesting question to Dr. Dasgupta, is that in times of need, where do you fall back on? Now, in our kind of setup, what has helped us tremendously is going back to the academic institutions. We have gone back to the experts, we have gone back to the best in class of academic institutions, where they have given us good inputs, both India and abroad. And I think that helped us quite a lot in designing our OD interventions, designing our coaching interventions. And as I had mentioned, that for all the generations, to address that generation diversity, for all the subsets, like for youngsters, we have a program called Uvantage. For middle band people, we have a program called Reboot at the age of 35 plus. And for the seniors, we have a program called Vashisht, where we bring in this element of coaching, we bring in this element of emotional awareness, use psychometric instruments in identifying, in helping them to create that awareness, and use instruments like 360-degree emotional intelligence tool, conflict management tool, MBTI tool, and find a correlation between all these robust tools, and make out our offering. And these offerings are longitudinal. These are not one-off kind of a training session or a program. These involve action learning. These involve a longitudinal kind of timeline to all these initiatives. So that in brief, that's what I had to say, Amy. Thank you.
No, I think thanks a lot, Push. You also mentioned that when people join you, you ask them the question as, why do you work over here, or why do we work? I think that's a fundamental question which will provoke people to go right from the surface to something deeper and get connected with the values and purpose of the organization. I think that's a very key thing. And the responses to that, to my friends, and that's easy for any one of us on the audience to emulate. It's just a simple question, but the responses can align people, and that alignment can bring about a lot of change. I'll just ask Dr. Jacob to tell us the challenges he faced. Sir, one or two things which are quite dramatic, right from Hollywood Western, you can tell us those a little briefly, but you unmute yourself. And because any change initiatives, while there can be tacit, covert resistance, but sometimes there's overt resistance, the way Dr. Jacob has faced, it gives you a picture. and makes you prepared?
Yeah, actually, they were nasty experiences. But at the same time, there were lessons that I learned from this, because one of the important things going to a new country, I had to learn the language. If I didn't learn the language, I would definitely not been able to perform and bring the results that were brought. So learning the language was priority. And then, of course, there was a lot of criminal activity going on. So working for the bank, they always think that, your World Bank, you carry your briefcase, it's full of cash. So there you go. They thought that's an ideal opportunity to get your briefcase, laptop. But through those experiences, uh, you know, it's amazing. Although I had security with me, uh, it's amazing to tell the story that the criminals actually used to uh, safeguard my travels as well. To the extent that even when I travel by air and come back, they are there to greet me, because they saw that I was performing a job there actually to help the country. I was not there to help myself, but to help them and to uplift their lives. So all these things put together complemented, and this is the reason why, even though I had a few nasty experiences and the Prime Minister wanted me to come to the capital city, I said no. I'm prepared to go and finish my task. So I had to go to those remote places to live out there with the people, and was able to perform my job without any problem. So uh, it actually taught me also how I have to adjust myself to situations. When you work amongst, the rural poor and people who are downgraded, the only way to uplift them is to live amongst them and then, undergo whatever you undergo, but take it with a smile. Don't take it against him. The police actually arrested the man who assaulted me, and when he was charged in court, I told the magistrate, it's okay, I will speak to him, and we resolved the matter out of court. Although I had a very bad bash on my head and had to be medevac to Australia and, miss my brain. The doctors there, when I revived, they asked me, which God do you worship? And I said, the God on top. And they said, oh, you're not meant to die, you're meant to live. So experiences like this actually strengthened my faith, and they were lessons taught to myself to pull myself out, not to have pride, to be humble and to empathize with one another. And this is why I'm still in coaching, still willing to do pro bono coaching to help the Gen Z. Thank you.
No, wonderful, Dr. Jacob. Friends, what we can stitch together from here, Push spoke about purpose, and here there is passion in what Dr. Jacob is telling. Dr. Dasgupta spoke of persistence. So if you look at all these things, when there's purpose, you can face any kind of resistances and move on with passion and persistence. I can. That's one thing which is emerging from the train of thought right now from these three luminaries. So what I have, Dr. Jacob, there's a question for you. If you could answer that, and then if the audience has any more questions, we're happy to do that. Otherwise, we'll come down to kind of converging from where we are. So I'd like you to answer this question. In a way, you answered it, but K. Subbu, who's a very distinguished coach from Chennai, and ICF Chennai, says, the question's for Dr. Winston Jacob. What is the one trigger which made you decide on this most adventurous assignment?
Could you read the question?
Yes. What is the one trigger which made you decide on this most adventurous assignment?
It's the yardstick to professionalism, where emphasis here with a British company was social life, and my yardstick to professionalism was the professional results and professional life that I had to lead. So it was a hard decision to make, very difficult decision to make, but it had to be made in the interest of my family and my children too, because they were learning lessons for my entire family too. It was very difficult to go to that country, alone. We had to make the decision. If we go together as a family. Otherwise, we don't go. And I thankful that my wife decided, despite all those who said not to go, that she said, no, we'll go as a family.
Right.
So I had these two kids on my two arms, and we all took the step to go to this country.
Thank you so much.
I hope that answers your question.
I can see a lot of applaud happening, which means that they like your response, but it is definitely that distinction to make a difference is what was the trigger. So, friends, my distinguished panel, I think we should leave the audience with some thoughts of way forward. Given the complexity of the terrain, what could be done? I'd like Dr. Jacob to go first, and then Dr. Dasgupta, and Pushp last. And the only reason that Pushp is a serving officer right now, and his points, I'd like him to have the last word. So, Dr. Jacob, if you could quickly tell us what are the 2-3 things on way forward, maybe a minute or two, sir.
I would reckon the lessons that I have learned is to empathize with one another. And we all have 2 ears and 1 mouth. So the lesson I have learned is to listen intently to whatever people say before giving an answer, and also to help one another. That's been my forte right from my youth, from my scouting days, to actually help one another. And that's what I'm doing. Because the coming generation is going to be the youth of today. And I find that they have to be taught before they leave the gates of the university campuses. They should have a clear vision of their lives. And that's what I'm doing, encouraging them to plan before they leave so that they know what they're going to do. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that's good. Leaving a legacy for the next generation is something very important thing. And then you, with your reservoir of insights and wisdom, are only sharing it over. That's how I see it. And that's a lesson all of us can take. And it doesn't necessarily mean with length of years and experience, but any one of us now in this day and age can do that. Now, before Dr. Dasgupta responds, there's a question for you from Ramesh Shankar, the former retired CHR of Siemens. Ramesh, glad you're here on this forum, my friend. And you're asking some very insightful, incisive question to Dr. Dasgupta. He says, what's the secret of some bureaucrats being very effective and others not in a similar work environment? So I do not know if it comes under the OSA, Dr. Dasgupta. If it does, then there's no response. Then Ramesh should host you for a cup of tea. But otherwise, the question is all yours.
Thank you. That's a very interesting question. I would like to say a few things to put the matter in perspective. Even if the situations appear to be very similar, they may differ in essential detail. So you put two different persons in a somewhat similar situation, and the results may be entirely different. So that is one thing to be taken into account. The second point is that we all, whenever we are placed in a position where we have to take decisions, where we have to move the system forward, we have to have a very, good assessment of the threats that are there, which can really jeopardize any success and prevent any success from happening. So, first is threat analysis. Really speaking, it is a SWOT analysis in the classical sets. And then how do you neutralize those threats and use your opportunities? And here I must mention that I have found communication skills, empathy, and this whole experience that people have of building up their credibility, their sincerity to a cause, that works wonders. So if there is a problem which appears to be insurmountable, but a person approaches it with an open mind, he is willing or she is willing to listen to uh, different viewpoints, argue it out, and also offer solutions. That is extremely important. Empathy is important, understanding is important, but offering solutions and then working at solutions with the other side, which is not convinced initially about accepting a solution. I think that is very important for and has been a lesson that I have learned in various situations.
Thank you. So should I take that as a way forward also, or would you like to add any more comment to before we hand over to Push?
No, that's all that I had to offer.
Right. Push, you have the opportunity of having almost the last word. There are two questions for you. Well, one is which again Subbu asked, having worked very closely with one of the largest PSUs, I have always felt that PSUs attracted great talents from leading Indian business schools and engineering colleges, but of late I see some gaps. What do you think are the reasons? If you can answer, fine. Otherwise, we'll connect Subbu with you later. The other question which Lata Gupta, a fellow coach from Pune, asks is, how do you measure the impact of coaching for executives? So if you can just take these two things and give your final comments, I'll be grateful, Push.
Yeah, both of them are very interesting questions. First one, which was put by Subbu, is definitely that's a fact that we attract very good talent, but retention becomes an issue because it's not that something is wrong with the organization. It's, in my mind, better opportunities are available, and in fact, we consider that it is healthy that some amount of attrition is there in the organizations. We actually work for preparing people who can be our ambassadors and contribute in a better manner if they find better opportunities. So that is the approach we take. As far as measuring the impact of these programs, yes, one is definitely we measure these impacts through various kinds of metrics which we have put. In fact, actually, the topic of my thesis for PhD was measuring the impact of our leadership development program. So I can spend some time on that and explain. Yes, we need to put robust metrics. But that said, also what has to be kept in mind is that most of the HR initiatives are input oriented. If you give a good input, obviously the outcome would be a byproduct. I mean, it will be a good product. So we should not be, putting the horse before the cart and from that perspective design the program. They have to be robust, input-oriented programs. But there is definitely a place for measuring the impact. Now, as far as the summing up comment, what my experience and what kind of thing I have come across is that in this era, in this arena of human development, there is no linear equation. It's not a linear path. You can't be applying, a sort of very fixed set of path or a very logical or rational path, because you have to address a person as a whole human being, help him to find his purpose, passion, and then he will persist on that, which you had mentioned. So there is no linear equation as far as human development arena is concerned. In fact, what I find is that common sense, and this may sound counterintuitive, that common sense actually is the biggest enemy of professionalism. So we have to actually take professionalism, take this kind of approach, and not rely only on common sense, because my common sense, unfortunately, would be different from your common sense. So we should not be giving too much of impetus on that. So that's what I had to mention. Thanks, Amy. Thanks a lot.
Thanks a lot, Push. And as it is, even I can see in the chat, both Subbu and Lata are very pleased with your response. That was insightful about the input-oriented aspect. So it again comes back to this whole aspect of design thinking, understanding the end and then designing the whole intervention. I think that's good. So, friends, we've come to the end of this fascinating dialogue. So, what you saw in this, 90 minutes or 85 minutes was a caricature of what the terrain is in the public sector and the government sector. Both are very different but similar. You've seen a cross-border case as well. So, while each of the panelists spoke about purpose, and then you got passion, you got persistence. I'll give you the next P. With these comes the next one is called possibility, and this possibility is a force multiplier. So conventionally what we are doing is we're impacting the individual or a team, at best an organization. But when we take the government sector, that happens. Individuals do get impacted through coachings and such interventions. Teams do get impacted. Organizations do get impacted. But the ecosystem benefits. And that is a force multiplier. You saw the W2 example, or the thousands of people benefit the CSR through the HPCL's work, or how a whole nation got impacted in Papua New Guinea. So, friends, keep these things in mind: purpose, passion, persistence, possibility for you to keep moving ahead. I would like to sign off and let our host. I want to thank Push Joshi. He's a very busy man, but he's there with us, and heart, mind, and soul. Thank you, Push. I want to thank Dr. Jayant Dasgupta for his presence and his insights. Very humble person. Friends, he's done a lot for the country. So, it's wonderful. And Dr. Jacob, thank you, sir. Despite, all the, he's seen 80 summers and he's here agile as ever. So thank you. We take leave of you. Thank you, sirs.
Thank you very much, Emmy, and thank you all the speakers. I was fascinated with some of the stories which were shared, and thank you all. All the best. Have a great evening ahead.